Warning, this episode may contain disturbing content, soothing narration, and mild existential dread. Basically, murder ASMR for stressed professionals. Listener discretion is advised. Hell, it might be necessary.
Quick moment of reflection. This is episode 100, which means we have now spent an objectively unreasonable amount of time talking about fires, bombs, and the absolute audacity of criminals. Starting this show felt like a fun little side project. 100 episodes later, it's clear this is less of a hobby and more of a personality trait. So thank you for being here, for listening, for supporting the show, and for enabling what is essentially a very niche form of chaos. We couldn't do it without you. Mostly because talking to ourselves for this long would probably raise concerns. Some investigations hinge on witnesses. Some hinge on confessions. But the strongest cases, the ones that hold up decades later, hinge on scientific evidence. After 6 bombs were delivered across upstate New York, investigators knew Michael Stevens had the strongest motive, and his friend Earl Figley matched the suspect description seen arranging the deliveries. But knowing who looks suspicious isn't enough. To send them to prison, investigators had to convince a jury, because evidence doesn't lie, and explosives don't lie. They don't forget. They don't get nervous in an interrogation room. They don't try to rewrite history. They leave fragments, chemical signatures, tool marks, patterns. And when investigators began reconstructing the 6 devices that tore through western New York that night, a picture started to emerge, not just of how the bombs were built, but of the person who built them. Because while motive tells you why and witnesses tell you who, forensics can tell you how. And in this case, the how would become impossible to explain away thanks to a simple pair of wire cutters. Michael Stevens believed that he had the perfect patsy. He thought he could point the finger at Earl Figley and walk away. But despite his carefully laid plans, Stevens would find himself sitting in front of a jury because the evidence proved he was culpable too. Today, we're stepping into the lab, into the fragments, the residue, and the mistakes that would turn suspicion into evidence. This is Domestic Detonation, the Upstate New York Bomb Plot, Part 2, on Crime to Burn. Welcome to Crime to Burn, where we explore the dark, sooty landscape where true crime intersects with arson and criminal negligence. Join us as we sift through the ashes to bring you the story of what really happened. Welcome back to Crime to Burn. I'm April, a fire protection engineer, former firefighter, and forensics nerd.
And I'm energy perpetually contracting.
Thank you so much for listening. And first, I owe you an apology for our unscheduled break last week. Life threw a few curveballs, and sometimes when you're hanging onto deadlines by a fingernail, something just has to give. So we thank you for your patience while we regrouped. And if this episode got uploaded on time, you should be impressed. And if it's late, just know that I tried. And this week we're celebrating our 100th episode, so break out your beverage of choice, grab your most sacred snacks, and settle in, because today we're getting real nerdy. Before we dive in, a quick reminder that we desperately need your fingers, specifically to tap those 5 stars wherever you're listening. We don't have a PR team, and those ratings tell the big podcast overlords, especially Apple and Spotify, that we're worth pushing into a very crowded space. We're not asking for you to pay us, just tap the stars. But if you do want to support the show financially, we do have a Patreon where you can listen to every episode ad-free. The link is in the show notes. We'd love to have you join us over at the Cult of Steve at the Sacred Snack Table. And if it's not in your budget, no worries, we will always be free with ads on your favorite podcast platform. And another way to help is by wearing our logo on your body, because nothing says excellent judgment like Crime to Burn merch. You can find our Spreadshop link in the show notes also. And tell your friends, share, like, favorite, and comment when you see our posts. The algorithm is a fickle beast, and your engagement helps more than you know. I've been a little absent from social media lately, but I promise I am trying, so don't let my algorithm neglect stop you from spreading the word. A sincere thank you to NYY Fan in Bose for the Apple Podcast review, and yes, we agree the ducks are better than the car horns were. We're currently sitting at 66 5-star ratings on Apple and 67 on Spotify, and I just want to say that I appreciate every single one of you. Thank you again to Tinky Bothma for leaving us another Podbean comment, and to KXNSZSIC
LMNOP.
and Mark Wilcox for your recent Podbean comments. We see you and we appreciate you helping to boost our engagement. As always, you can email us your case suggestions, episode feedback, fire stories, and right now your lesser-known cold remedies because we have a very sick child in the house. So if you happen to hear coughing in the background, that's why. She is absolutely miserable and we're just hoping she keeps her germs to herself because it's been absolutely brutal on her and she is miserable. So back to our upstate New York mass bombing. As we discussed last week, in December of 1993, 6 different bombs were sent across upstate New York. All 6 intended victims were members of the same family. 2 of the bombs did not detonate. 1 malfunctioned, and 1 couldn't be delivered because the intended victim wasn't at work, and the correctional facility where he worked refused to accept the package. Once investigators realized all the victims were related and that delivery had been attempted to another family member at a workplace, they had the courier dispatcher radio the driver and instruct him to pull over, abandon the vehicle, and wait for police. So investigators now had 2 unexploded devices to examine. All 6 bombs were delivered in cardboard boxes stuffed with newspaper, with the devices themselves concealed inside plastic tackle boxes. When the latch was disengaged, the bombs exploded. Now let's take a minute to talk about different types of bombs. When we talk about amateur bomb plots, we're usually talking about pipe bombs. In a pipe bomb, a low explosive, typically smokeless powder or gunpowder, is used. And it's a common misnomer to say that a pipe bomb detonated. A detonation occurs when a reaction front moves through the material faster than the speed of sound. With detonatable fuels, the chemical reaction produces an enormous volume of gas so rapidly that it actually compresses the surrounding air, which is what creates the shockwave.
What happens in a diesel motor? Is that a detonation?
I don't think so. I don't think diesel's a detonatable fuel.
Supposedly when, like in a conventional gasoline motor, like on the downstroke of the piston, if it fires on the compression stroke, I think I'm saying this right, they consider that to be a detonation. So I think that they're just using the terms maybe differently.
It's possible, but what I have learned is that there are motors that depend on detonation, but a lot of deflagrable fuels, which are fuels that can't detonate, can be pushed into a reaction front moving that fast with specific geometries that they are contained within. But I don't totally understand the science of how they do it, but I do know there is a detonation motor out there, but I don't think it's a standard diesel motor. But I remember looking that up back when we did our very first bombing case, which was the Benson car bombing. But the Benson car bombing, those were pipe bombs, and those were not detonatable fuels. He used smokeless powder. So that was a deflagrable fuel.
Deflagrable.
Yeah, it's a hard word to say. I hate that word. But with low explosives, which aren't capable of true detonation, the shockwave forms differently. The explosive material must be confined within a fixed geometry like a pipe, and the gas builds up until the container catastrophically ruptures. And that rupture is what produces the blast effect. What makes these bombs unique in this case is that they did use detonatable explosives, dynamite, and they were placed inside a confined container, the tackle box. But because the tackle boxes were plastic, they would have failed faster than, say, a metal pipe, so the explosion may have been less violent had they tried to use a low explosive like gunpowder. But the dynamite is detonatable, so the structural integrity of the container was less important. Inside the tackle boxes, investigators found metal hardware, stamped metal hardware, and screws and similar items that were intended to act as shrapnel. This dramatically increases lethality because even if someone survives the initial blast, penetrating fragments can sever arteries or cause catastrophic internal injuries. The only person who survived opening one of the devices that did detonate did so outside of his home in his yard using a rake to lift the latch from a distance. Even so, he still suffered serious injuries to the lower half of his body from that shrapnel. But because he was outdoors, the pressure wave could dissipate more freely, and he survived long enough to receive the necessary medical care. And while the explosive force itself was devastating, it was the tiny details left behind, fragments most people probably wouldn't even think twice about, that would ultimately tie these devices to the people that built them. Many people assume that in a bombing, the evidence of the device is largely destroyed, but that isn't the case. The explosive material undergoes a violently rapid chemical reaction, but not all of the fuel is consumed. So tiny particles are dispersed throughout the environment where the explosion occurred, and forensic scientists can collect those particles and analyze them to determine what type of explosive was used. So even if investigators hadn't recovered the 2 unexploded devices, they still would have been able to determine that these bombs were made with dynamite. And as we discussed last week, investigators already knew that a man using a fake ID had purchased dynamite in Kentucky the summer before. That purchase had drawn attention after roughly 100 sticks of dynamite were discovered discarded near a dumpster behind a restaurant. When the investigators tracked down the seller was able to provide purchase records. However, the driver's license used in the transaction turned out to be fake, which initially led to a dead end. But the employees who completed the sale remembered the buyer, and they remembered he had a glass eye. And it just so happened that Michael Stevens' friend Earl Figley also had a glass eye. The courier services that delivered several of the bombs told investigators that the man who arranged the shipments had, you guessed it, a glass eye. So when investigators went to question Brenda and her boyfriend Michael Stevens, they found Earl Figley there with him. And Earl Figley has a glass eye. At that point, it was becoming a little difficult to ignore that there might be a link here. In addition, the courier service recalled that the man with the glass eye had paid in cash and pulled that cash from a very distinctive red wallet. So when investigators asked Figley for his identification, they were surprised to see him pull out nothing other than a red wallet. Now, a red wallet alone isn't enough to secure a conviction, but it was enough to bring Michael, Brenda, and Earl in for questioning. But before we get to what happened in the interrogation room, let's talk about more of the physical evidence. We already know that forensic analysis can identify the type of explosive used, but that's not all investigators can do. A bombing investigation is often like the world's worst jigsaw puzzle. Investigators painstakingly process each scene, collecting every single piece of solid material they can find. And that debris is sifted, sorted, and sent to the lab, where analysts actually work to reconstruct the entire device piece by piece. Very little of a bomb is completely destroyed by the explosion. Instead, tiny fragments are scattered by the blast, and it becomes a meticulous process of breaking the scene down into grids and sifting through the debris in each of those grids, photographing, cataloging, tagging, and then analyzing each fragment. Sometimes when investigators recover larger pieces of a device, they're even able to lift fingerprints, and in some cases, they've been able to obtain DNA from bomb fragments. But that wasn't the case here. Investigators had hoped to find fingerprints or DNA belonging to Stevens or Figley, but they came up empty. So for each bombing scene, investigators collected literally thousands of pieces of evidence for processing. In addition to fragments of tackle boxes, pieces of electric switches, blasting caps, wiring, and other components, investigators also recovered portions of the newspaper and even part of the cardboard shipping boxes that had been used to deliver the devices. Now, you might assume the bomber expected the explosion to destroy that newspaper they used as packing material, but we're about to see that the bomber actually intended for investigators to find it. But while forensics teams worked the scene, police brought Brenda, Michael, and Earl in for questioning. And within 24 hours of the bombings, investigators obtained a 43-page signed confession from Earl Figley. We know that Earl had suffered a permanent brain injury in a car accident years earlier. And we also know that he deeply admired Michael Stevens, even living with him for a time before Brenda moved in when their relationship became more serious. But despite that loyalty, Figley signed a detailed confession outlining his role in the crime, which he told investigators had been completely masterminded by Michael Stevens. He said that Michael knew Brenda wanted to leave him, and he believed that her family was encouraging her to do so. Several members of Brenda's family had allegedly offered support, encouragement, financial assistance, and a place to stay if she decided to leave.
What a bunch of jerks.
Right?
That sounds like pretty cool.
Yeah. According to Figley's confession, Michael plotted the bombings to eliminate Brenda's support network so that she would have nowhere to go and no financial safety net, ensuring that she could not leave him.
That is just straight diabolical, man. That's above and beyond weird. That's sicko territory.
Yeah, I have serious questions about this guy's brain chemistry. What's especially notable is that according to Figley's statement, Brenda was not involved in the plot. She was eventually released while Earl and Michael were both arrested and charged in connection with the bombings. Figley also told investigators that Michael Stevens had sent him to Buffalo, New York to purchase a stack of newspapers. Newspapers that would later be packed into the shipping boxes alongside those tackle box bombs. According to Figley, Michael had specifically wanted the newspapers purchased in Buffalo to throw investigators off their trail, leading them to focus on the Buffalo area rather than Rochester, where he and Brenda actually lived. He told Figley that there was some kind of family dispute in Brenda's family with somebody in the Buffalo area, and he believed that the presence of the Buffalo newspapers would send police down the wrong trail in the investigation. Stevens therefore had anticipated that some of the newspaper fragments would survive the explosion, and he believed that the presence of those newspapers would misdirect investigators and help eliminate him as a suspect. But investigators also knew that when they charged Michael Stevens, his defense would likely be that Earl Figley had acted alone. In fact, Michael insinuated that the bombings may have been an act of revenge against Brenda by Earl. He claimed that Earl was jealous of her relationship with him.
We know what they say. Figliness is next to loneliness.
Now, we know Earl was a devoted follower of Michael and had lived with him for some time. And Michael maintained that Earl's motive was to punish Brenda because her relationship with Michael had displaced Earl, forcing him to move into a motel where investigators believed the bombs had been constructed. So police obtained a search warrant for Earl's motel room, where they found bomb-making manuals and boxes identical to those used to ship the devices. Investigators also received a tip about a storage unit. Inside, they discovered dynamite, blasting caps, and a wig along with theatrical makeup, items Earl had reportedly used as a disguise while making bombs. He knew enough to disguise himself, but his glass eye and that distinctive red wallet still gave him away. According to the documentary that I watched, which you can find in the show notes, the storage unit had been rented by Michael Stevens, but investigators knew that Figley had been the one wearing the disguises and mailing the packages, and renting the motel room where the bombs had been built. Even with Stevens tied to the storage unit, investigators still needed something more, a piece of physical evidence that directly linked Michael to the devices themselves. Because without that, Michael could argue that Figley had access to the unit, and that he had no idea what Earl was doing. And if that argument held up, the entire case could hinge on whether a jury believed Stevens was the mastermind or just a bystander. But with Earl's signed confession, investigators were able to obtain a search warrant for Michael Stevens' home. Investigators knew Michael intended to portray Earl as a lone conspirator. Michael had ensured Earl played a large enough role in building and delivering the bomb to support that defense. He intended to use Earl as his patsy. Investigators therefore needed proof that Michael Stevens had been physically involved in constructing the devices. And that's exactly what the search warrant gave them. In Michael's basement, investigators located a pair of wire cutters. Michael's DNA was on the tool, evidence that he had used it.
His DNA was on the tool.
And it had likely been returned to the house after the bombs were assembled. After all, wire cutters are a common household tool. He had likely never imagined that this seemingly ordinary item would become the piece of evidence that proved Earl Figley had not acted alone, because tools leave signatures. A tool like wire cutters cut at a specific angle depending on the geometry of the blades. Some produce a shallower cut, others a steeper one. But angle alone isn't enough to definitively match a tool to a piece of wire that's been cut. But under microscopic examination, the cutting surfaces contain tiny imperfections, microscopic abrasions and wear patterns that leave unique marks on whatever material they cut. Those marks function almost like a fingerprint. So forensic analysts compare these microscopic tool marks to determine whether a specific tool could have produced a particular cut. It's meticulous work, requiring careful comparison and testing across multiple positions along the blade. In this case, the lab was able to match the microscopic imperfections on the wire cutter blades to the cut wires recovered from the unexploded devices. Combined with Michael's DNA on the tool, this provided powerful evidence that he had participated directly in assembling the bombs, corroborating Earl's account of the plot. Now, toolmark analysis has come under scrutiny over the years, but the underlying science is well established and studies have shown high accuracy rates. Like many pattern comparison disciplines, though, the reliability depends heavily on the quality of the evidence and the expertise of the examiner. We've seen several forensic techniques face modern reevaluation. Bite mark analysis, for example, has been largely discredited. But tool marks in solid materials are far more stable and readable than bite marks in soft tissue. Solid objects don't bend or deform in the same way, which allows a tool's wear patterns, chips, and microscopic abrasions to leave more consistent and durable marks that can be compared. Still, some critics argue that tool mark comparison involves a degree of subjectivity, and it's important to acknowledge that. But in this case, the tool mark evidence didn't stand alone. It was supported by a co-conspirator's confession, a clear motive, other physical evidence, and a timeline that aligned with the forensic findings. Now investigators needed one final piece. They needed Earl to testify against Michael. Prosecutors offered Earl a plea deal in exchange for his testimony. He had already confessed, so prison was inevitable. Accepting the deal was an easy decision. For his role in the bombing plot that killed 5 people, seriously injured another, and targeted 2 additional victims, Earl Figley pled guilty and received a 20-year prison sentence. By this point, investigators had 6 nearly identical devices, all constructed with a high explosive, dynamite. Each bomb had been concealed inside a plastic tackle box containing 2 to 3 sticks of dynamite, blasting caps, and an electrical triggering mechanism designed to detonate when the latch was opened. All were packaged in identical cardboard boxes stuffed with buffalo newspapers, and they used the same type of wiring, and they were delivered to members of the same family within roughly a 90-minute window. So there was no credible argument that these devices had been built independently. Investigators had more than enough evidence to prove that Michael Stevens was both the mastermind and an active participant. Despite the overwhelming evidence and the testimony of his friend, Stevens was offered plea deals. But he genuinely believed a jury would accept his claim that Figley had acted alone, framing the bombings as a revenge plot driven by jealousy after being displaced from Stevens' home. So, he chose to go to trial. He had nothing left to lose. Michael Stevens' trial began on March 6, 1995, in U.S. District Court in Rochester, New York. But his attempts to shape the outcome began long before that. While incarcerated awaiting trial, Stevens solicited fellow inmates to help establish a false alibi for him. He also attempted to recruit inmates to kill Earl Figley, believing that without the state's key witness, he would walk free. Now, jailhouse informant testimony can be questionable, but in this case, 7 inmates testified about Stevens' attempt to recruit them. 7.
This guy just wakes up scheming and just goes to bed scheming.
1 informant can be shaky. 2 might raise concerns, but 7 is devastating.
And this episode is brought to you by the 7 jailhouse informants. Snitchy, stabby, shady, blabby, shifty, sneaky, and keister.
Stevens also petitioned the court to act as co-counsel in his own defense, but the judge denied the request. I think the judge denied the request because based on everything I've heard of people that worked with him talking about the case in the documentary, the guy was just like, he was the kind of person nobody wanted to deal with. He was impossible to talk to. You couldn't convince him he was wrong about anything. That was the impression I got.
I've been accused of that.
Yeah, but have you ever sent 6 bombs across upstate New York?
No, I've never even sent a single fruitcake.
During the trial, prosecutors called 72 witnesses, including Earl Figley. The defense strategy focused heavily on portraying Figley as the brilliant but brain-damaged man deeply scarred by his own divorce, who had acted independently in a misguided attempt to punish Brenda for driving a wedge between him and Stevens. They argued that Figley's mental state made him unreliable and that his testimony couldn't be trusted. After the prosecution rested, the defense called no witnesses. Michael Stevens did not testify. After 3 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for just 3 hours before returning a verdict: guilty. Michael Stevens was sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences. Despite his attempt to destroy her entire family in an effort to control her, Brenda Shavir did not move out of the home they had shared. Even more striking, she continued to visit Stevens in prison. Wayne Miller, in the book Bang Boom Burn, raises the question of how jurors may have viewed Brenda and whether they wondered if she had any involvement. I find that difficult to believe, but her continued loyalty to a man who tried to annihilate her support system is undeniably striking.
Also, not happening in a vacuum. People do this sort of behavior all the time. Honestly, it's not inconceivable.
Now, I won't judge her. The psychology of abuse and coercive control is complex and far outside my expertise, but her loyalty is difficult for me to understand. Earl Figley served his sentence and was released in 2011 at the age of 80. Michael Stevens, however, spent the rest of his life behind bars. He died on October 26, 2024, less than 2 years ago. Whether Brenda was still in contact with him at the time of his death is unknown. But what makes this case especially chilling isn't just the violence, it's the motive behind it. This wasn't about money. It wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense. It was about control. One of the most dangerous times in an abusive relationship is when someone tries to leave. That's when escalation often happens, because the person losing control feels like they're losing their identity, their stability, and their power. Most abusers isolate their partners socially. They undermine friendships and create conflict within family to limit independence. But Stevens took that concept to an unimaginable extreme. Instead of isolating Brenda emotionally, he tried to erase her entire support system. And that level of planning tells us something important. This wasn't impulsive rage, it was calculated coercion. It's a reminder of why support networks matter so much and why leaving can be the most dangerous moment for someone in a controlling relationship. And we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about how many moving parts had to come together to prevent that final bomb from being delivered. You see, when state bomb investigators were brought in, one of the first things they did was issue a statewide bulletin. And it was because of that alert that the additional bombings and suspicious packages were quickly recognized as potentially related attacks. That recognition allowed investigators to rapidly connect the targets and realize they were all members of the same family. And with that information, police were able to contact the other family members and quickly learn that one intended victim had received a package at work that had not been accepted. And that detail is what allowed investigators to contact the courier, locate the package, and interrupt the delivery before it could detonate. Now, before we wrap up, I want to take a moment to acknowledge something this case highlights: coercive control and abusive relationships. If you're listening and you recognize patterns of isolation, control, intimidation, or fear in your own relationship, you are not alone and help is available. Leaving can feel overwhelming and sometimes dangerous, especially when someone is trying to control your support systems. Talking to someone who understands these dynamics can make a difference. You can call or text the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE in the United States, or visit thehotline.org to chat online. They're available 24 hours a day, confidentially, and they can help you explore options and make a plan that feels safe for you. You deserve support. You deserve safety. and you deserve to have people in your life who care about your well-being. And that's the conclusion of Domestic Detonation, the Upstate New York bomb plot on Crime to Burn. Seems like if he didn't want her to leave, he could have,
That's a lot of energy just to devote to something. It seems like if it was directed in a slightly different direction.
Right, what if he spent that much energy, treating her like a princess, bringing home flowers and treating her well and appreciating her? Then maybe she wouldn't have wanted to leave.
Or trying to recruit those family members to his side with kindness.
Yeah.
I don't think he had those qualities about him.
No. From everything I've read about him, nobody comes out and says he was narcissistic, but the information that people have provided about him suggests that there's a lot of narcissistic tendencies there.
The tendencies that he felt entitled to kill people? That's narcissism.
And that he thought...
He wasn't in trouble. They weren't attacking him,
And that he thought that he could point investigators to the wrong path by using the Buffalo newspapers and still had Earl as his patsy.
He's super clever, isn't he?
He thought he was. But he's the one that had the strongest motive. How stupid do you have to be?
Who else wants to blow these people up, homie?
Right. Yeah, we better not be sitting here for 6 hours.
I won't be sitting here for 6 hours.
Is it Boogie Woogie or Boogie Oogie? It's been so long since I've heard the electric slide.
Highly trained athletes like myself have to stay hydrated.
Time warps weird when you don't go to bed until 5 a.m. And so he mailed bombs to her family members to remove her support network because without financial support or a place to stay, she wouldn't be able to leave him. And he really thought he was going to get away with it.
It's truly a bizarre strategy. You could have sent him fruitcake and accomplished nearly the same thing.
Do you even know how to make figgy pudding?
You can learn anything off the internet. I think the algorithm is broken, though. Because the algorithm's supposed to, figure out what you like. Give you, more of that, right? I'm telling it specifically, I don't like certain things and I'm not interested, and it just won't stop. It's dumb.
What don't you like?
Boner pills. You don't have to just blast people with boner pills constantly. Oh, are you having trouble with your willy? Does your elevator not go all the way up?
I've gotten 0 ads for boner pills.
They probably know you can't get a boner.
I can get a lady boner.
Right, but you need a pill. Did they even make a pill for that?
I don't know.
But imagine this sub-basement of Dante's Inferno. It's just blue light and influencers with ring lights, and they're trying to sell each other boner pills.
And diet aids.
Forever.
Are you ready to get started?
Yeah, I guess.
Am I ready to get started?
Knowing where it came from makes it delicious in some ways.
Because the Mormons bought it? This beer sponsored by the Mormons. Not all of them, just a couple. Actually, I paid for it, but I had to use their Costco card. Pause to rectify a wet dog situation. Will you towel me off like that later? That looks like it feels good.
How fucking old am I, man? I get out of breath from wiping down a dog.
It would be justifiable if you got out of breath wiping me down.
Yeah, that's quite aerobic.
And before we go, a quick programming note. This is our 100th episode. And that's our dog. That's right, 100 episodes of arson, explosions, bad decisions, and me explaining fire science like it's normal dinner conversation.
And me still not understanding.
We started this show with a microphone, a questionable amount of caffeine, and absolutely no idea what we were doing. And somehow, against all odds and probably several algorithms, you're still here. So whether you've been with us since episode 1 or you just wandered in because you like chaos with footnotes, thank you for listening. Here's to 100 episodes of Crime to Burn, and to however many more questionable research rabbit holes we fall into next. And somehow, through sheer stubbornness and a concerning amount of hyperfocus, this is our 100th episode. That's hundreds of hours of research, thousands of pages of records, and at least 3 government watch lists that I'm probably on now. If you've listened to even a fraction of that, you're either deeply curious, mildly concerning, or just really into explosions. Either way, we appreciate you. Thanks for sticking around while we continue to professionally ruin dinner conversations everywhere. Are you doing a thing?
A society that understands fire survives. A society that doesn't makes documentaries. If you've been listening to this show since the beginning, you've hit your head on this thing again. If you've listened to the last 50 episodes, you probably have more fire training than the average adult.
You might even have more fire training than some of the fire investigators out there.
Oh, burn.
Burn.
Gonna need some aloe and ice for that burn.
Let's leave ice out of this.
You listened for entertainment, but you stayed for survival and inappropriate humor.
And snacks.
I think public safety through inappropriate humor is a good way to go.
We could have had a back and forth argument about it, but I can't really interrogate my ideas if it's not going to argue with me. I need it to argue with me.
You need the ArgueBot 4.2.
Let's make the ArgueBot. It's going to say every idea you have is
And here's why.
so that and if you can convince ArgueBot, then your logic is pretty damn solid.
That's not a bad idea, really.
TM.
Patent pending.
Suddenly I have the urge to laugh.
Go ahead, get it out of your... You just do it, man. You don't have to have a reason, psycho. I think his parents probably knew that he was destined for prison when they named him Earl.
No offense to anyone else named Earl out there.
Earl Figley.
Earl Figley.
I don't know, man. That could be like a bourbon or something.
Okay, you're right. If he had a distillery, Earl Figley would be a perfect name.
He just went down the wrong career path.
Wrong career path.
It was the whole brain damage thing, probably.
He was a science teacher before his
Sure did.
brain injury.
Mr. Figley is his father.
Old one-eyed Figley.
Oh, Winky. Winky Figgy. Figgy Winky.
Thank you for letting me use your battery even though I didn't recharge it.
Yeah, sure, man. No problem. Thanks for letting me touch your boobs sometimes.
It's your legal right.
Is it?
You married me.
Is that how that works? I gotta just wave this paper around. Titties now! I'm gonna try that later. See how that works out for me.
You don't even know where our marriage license is. Since I am starting to get the beginnings of a cold, hopefully my immune system will keep it, hopefully I've been exposed for several days and my immune system's already started building up antibodies so I won't get it as bad. So I'm hoping. But if I'm as coffee as she is next weekend's episode might be late.
You might have to go to Colombia.
What's in Colombia?
Coffee.
Oh.
This episode is brought to you by 100 Financially Irresponsible Decisions.
Yeah. This episode is brought to you by microscopic tool marks. Because even when you think you've covered your tracks, science is still quietly judging you. This episode's brought to you by the world's worst jigsaw puzzle. Now with more explosives and fewer edge pieces. This episode's brought to you by 7 jailhouse informants. Statistically excessive, legally inconvenient.
Do you think they had little hats like the dwarves in Snow White? Snitchy and Stabby are going to live in my cell block. They're just going to call me Betty or Susan. What's a name for a dwarf that smuggles things in his butt? Keister. Just name him Keister.
Sly, cagey, skulky, dodgy, slinky, wily.
Slinky's a funny word, at least.
Wily or Wiley.
It's 2 on the nose. Get rid of that.
You don't like Wiley? I
No.
like Wiley.
It would be a fine name if you're going to name somebody that, but we're talking about prison dwarves. We've got Shifty, Stabby, Snitchy.
We've got Snitchy, Stabby, Shady, Blabby, Talky, Shifty, and Sneaky.
And Keister.
Oh, wait, that's 8. Which one should we get rid of? Let's get rid of Talky. I don't like Talky.
Well, that's probably what would happen naturally.
All right.
Snitchy, Stabby, Shady, Blabby. Oh, that kind of rhymes. Snitchy, Stabby, Shady, Blabby, Shifty, Sneaky, and Keister. I wonder what Keister does.
Smuggles things in his prison wallet. I'm not a farty person. I don't know.
You know, some people are just farty. They're just generally farty. Yeah.
Some people are.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes, nervous farting is absolutely a thing, and there's actual physiology behind it. When you're nervous, anxious, or stressed, your body activates the fight or flight response that affects your digestive tract in a few ways. It increases...
Now it's fight, flight, or fart. You could never be a public educator because you're a private tutor. Thanks for writing down so many things to make 100 episodes of this jazz.
You're welcome.
And you're welcome for me not writing down a single thing that I can read. Like, subscribe, comment, buy a boner pill. Is your pecker downtrodden? Does it only stare at your shoes? Would you like it to turn on the light switch for you?
Well, that was bleak. Thanks for listening. Try not to solve your personal problems with explosives, and we'll talk again soon.
Don't forget to eat your boner pills. This episode is brought to you by so many boner pills. You can just imagine yourself running through a field of erections.
All right. I think on that note, we're done. Crime to Burn is a production of Crime to Burn, LLC, where we light fires in your brain and not your buildings. All rights reserved. Still spiritually parched after this episode? It's okay, Steve believes in cross-pollination. Here's a trailer for a show we think deserves to infiltrate your ear holes, in a good way. Don't forget to leave a 5-star review before you go. Steve is watching.
Love a good mystery that leaves you wanting more? Check out my podcast. Hi, I'm Kadra, the host of Perplexity, a Mystery Podcast. I tell tales every single week that have left me perplexed. You'll hear true crime cases, mysterious disappearances, learn about cults, hear baffling sightings of cryptids, chilling paranormal encounters, and even dark and weird history. I release new episodes every Wednesday, and you can listen anywhere podcasts are available. I'm also on Patreon, and you can even watch me on YouTube. Perplexity, a Mystery Podcast. Stories that will leave you perplexed.